Welcome. My name is Gena Timberman, and you are listening to Timber People, a podcast about people who, like timber, are strong, build and create, who gather us together like fuel that feeds fire. People who support structures of our community that uplift and protect. What an honor it is today to welcome Dr. Greg Guedel onto the Timber People show. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. And I've been a big fan of the show for a long time and really, really grateful for the chance to have our conversation today.
Thank you so much. You know, I want the listeners to know about your important work, your research, and how you've really committed your professional life and journey to assisting tribes and governments and others in economic development pursuits and energy. I want to say a few words about your background, but also you serve as the legal counsel to the Tribal Energy Consortium and the founder of Guedel's Strategic Law, which really serves nations throughout Oklahoma and the United States. And your emphasis, your research, your writing, and representing tribes and businesses for planning and also for the engagement of economic development pursuits and energy and in other areas is really important work. And I'm so happy that we're here together with your family as well to dive in and to talk about what that means for tribes in today's world.
Thank you. Yes. And what I have the privilege of doing is really supporting tribes in their own self-determination and the pursuit of the goals and needs and priorities that they set. And what we found through research and then just the direct experience in the communities out on the ground is the best way for tribes to deal with the problems they've experienced and to make progress on the goals that they have for the community is self-governance.
Right.
Really take it inside, not rely on any outside powers, whether it's federal or anybody else, but manage it themselves because nobody knows more about the situations than they do, and nobody's ever going to care more about their community than they do for themselves.
Absolutely.
And so in order to have that translate into results, I'm working with tribes to say, here are your legal tools, here are your political powers that you can apply. So let's figure out the right pathway for you to take control and then move forward on your timeline with your priorities and bring things to life. So that's very satisfying, rewarding work for me to be able to support. And we see results when tribes do that. That's really the best part is when you see goals being accomplished and people's lives being taken to the next higher level.
Right. And you can't talk about tribes and really without talking about sovereignty. And as you mentioned, assisting tribes with the tools to really self-govern in ways that make sense and really positively impact their communities. It's so important. And I know your work really focuses so much on tribal self-governance and energy and really that right, that innate right, sovereign right to create tribal laws and to be ruled by them in regards to their natural resources is always been important for tribes. But moving forward in the future, giving tribes that next layer of ownership and less control from others.
It's really trying to remedy some of the historical things that happen, and specifically with regard to land. When we're talking about energy, we're usually talking about a land-based extraction process or energy development or the systems, the wires, everything that goes on with energy is land-based. And tribes, of course, had a history with regard to land and how it was originally in their care, then it was taken, then they were assigned areas of land, and then those things would sort of ebb and flow with the whims of the United States. So we've got this really difficult history about how tribes have been dislocated, first of all, from their land. But what we have today, even in the areas where tribal governments and tribal reservation boundaries have been set for a while and seem well established, what's happening on the tribe's land with regard to who has the right to come in and do energy development, like drilling for oil, who has the right to come onto the tribe's land to put a pipeline or wires, all of those different infrastructure things that impact the use of the land. The tribes haven't controlled that. That has been primarily controlled by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, a federal agency. And again, you've got an outside party managing things for the community and the people who live there. There's a disconnect that's just naturally going to happen. But it's really a situation in most cases where not only is that disconnect present, but the BIA does things without even letting the tribe know or getting them involved in the process to say, hey, is this what you want? Does this work for your plans for the land? They'll just give out an agreement to an oil company to drill or to build the pipeline, and then the tribe maybe gets informed after the fact, sometimes not even that. So we've got this situation not just with tribes that say have oil resources, but all over the country. The BIA has given easements and rights of way to all kinds of different companies, but the tribe wasn't involved. So one of the things we're prioritizing now is, to the extent you've been able to solidify your control over the land in terms of ownership and say, okay, here is our nation, these are our boundaries. Now you've got to take control over who's got access and how that works and make sure it's conditional upon your approval as a tribe and consistent with your laws and values as a nation.
Right. It's important on tribal lands, but also where tribes have had a historic presence. I mean, when you talk about monitoring and surveying and respecting those deep-rooted connections that tribes have spiritually and with a presence, and as we know in Oklahoma, forced federal acts of removal, the reality of tribes having this presence across the continent, having tribal input, feedback, ownership of these activities is so important.
And the BIA won't know things, for example, like which areas of a reservation are sacred grounds, are traditional cultural grounds for ceremonies and dancing and things of that nature. Those things aren't on maps, but those are vitally important to the community. And if the BIA is negotiating something to go across tribal land just based on what's on a geographic map, they're going to have an absence of detail and depth that they need. This is another reason why having the tribes control these things and be the ones who can say yes or no to what happens in a period and in a location makes it so the traditional values of the land, the traditional uses of the land, and the benefits to the community are respected, are not impacted, and they can maintain that permanently. But that, again, is an area where the tribe has to really assert itself. It's got to take its sovereignty and operationalize it and say to everybody, we're taking control of this now because we're the best people to do it. And if they don't take that step, then you continue in this cycle of federal management that we've seen be problematic at all levels.
Absolutely. And really understanding the steps and those tools that you mentioned, really, tribes have so much diversity, as we all know, and to have something like a model tribal energy code is so important. I know that your longstanding work and commitment to the research and writing and pursuit of implementing this code could really mean so much to so many different tribes and tribal communities.
Well, we can start a little by background talking about why this work was done and the creation of a model tribal energy code. And one of the things that you realize on a fundamental level is that governments govern through laws. If a government is going to control what happens within its jurisdiction and what people are and are not allowed to do, that's got to be written down and codified into laws. Even if you have complete sovereignty, which is the term we hear discussed all of the time in tribal discussions, over a particular area, and tribes as governments, as nations, absolutely have sovereignty. That in and of itself is a potential power. It's an authority, but it's not actually governing. And when we look, for example, at the state codes, state of Oklahoma, or whatever state you're in, and look at the amount of law that the state has on the books to regulate what is happening within the state boundaries, those same activities are all happening within tribal boundaries, but for most tribes, they only have a fraction of that amount of law. They're not covering the business issues and the health issues and all of the other things that you would say if you want to comprehensively govern an area, you've got to have that on the books. But of course, the federal legislature and the state legislatures work year-round, multi-billion-dollar investments working on passing laws. So it's a huge lift. And most tribes that are focused on their communities with limited resources haven't had that. They haven't had the ability to really invest the same way. So what we look at with model codes is a way by bringing in tribal experts, legal experts, professors from universities who have expertise, creating a starting point for tribes. This is a set of laws in a model code that's designed to be the place they can work from to create their own individual tribal laws without having to go through the whole process of inventing the wheel. These are recommended laws that are based on what's out there today that seems to work well. That's a good balance between efficiency in government and supporting economic development and supporting environmental protection, giving the tribe the ability to govern all of those things effectively, but not having to do it from square one. So with the model code, and this is done through the auspices of the Tribal Energy Consortium, which is a Native American nationally presenced 501c3 nonprofit, they made the investment. They went out and got grant money and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make this energy code for tribes so that they can take it in-house, customize it to work in their community on their land and have it integrate with their own laws, and then be able in rapid fashion to start taking over the things that the federal government has run in the past. So it's a tool for bringing tribal law to life and bringing sovereignty into an operational state and not having to reinvent the wheel, but just customize it for their own purposes.
It's so important that you're connecting those spheres of influence from the academic side to the practical implementation, working with tribal government, in working with states. I know you're admitted to the bar in Washington and in Oklahoma, and you've worked on the federal level and been working with U.S. district courts for many years. And I love to see that you are a member of at least 7 tribal courts, and that is really incredible that you're working with our legal warriors throughout Indian country and ensuring that the implementation of such a code is something that is really, so we can talk all day about the thought behind different theories and policy, but it's the implementation and that real where it hits the road and really means something to the governments and the people that those governments serve.
That's absolutely right. I've had the privilege of serving as an attorney general or prosecutor for several of the Oklahoma tribes and been in their courts using their criminal law and applying it for the protection of public safety, for the rehabilitation of people to bring them back into a productive life in the community. And I've seen firsthand how well that works.
Right.
When the tribe is using its laws, its way, and its system, it really works. But we've got huge gaps to fill in order for tribal governments to get their body of law and to get their full sovereignty applied at the same level as the national government or the federal government. And so the efforts of bringing in the different experts who've got knowledge and can help build those codes is designed to address that and to have tribes be able to take what's state of the art in terms of legal theory and application, and then bring it to customize with their values and their traditions and the things that are really important in their community. So when we look at a body of state law, I would say you really want to look at the table of contents of that. You don't want to replicate what the state does because a lot of their laws are frankly not in the tribe's best interest. But as far as the subject matter goes, all of the things that the state government is actually governing, that's where the tribes need to be in terms of what they're covering and have those things be governed in their territory, not by federal agencies or by state actors, but by the tribe itself. So we've got to make those gaps come not only complete in terms of having a law, but having laws that really work with the tribal point of view in mind. And that's what the effort's about.
Right. And the climate, the environment is right. If you look at, now more than ever, there are international, global, policies and goals, as well as our national, action plans as well, and incentives for tribes and businesses and others. And so the timing is really right. When you were entering law school, did you think about what this could mean years down the road and where we are today?
I was really just starting to connect with people who had grown up in tribal communities, were tribal members, and were able to, just through our daily interaction in law school, talk about those things. And even though I had grown up in a town that was named for a tribe and that there was a local tribe nearby, I hadn't really thought of that in terms of either a career or really just the need to address those issues. But in law school was really when things started to go that direction for me. And I was very blessed to have some friends who were members of local tribes and then became very prominent in advocacy and leadership for their tribal communities and nationally. And so that's when the light bulb started to go on. And for me, because I really enjoy political science, economic development, and those things, I found a tremendously engaging challenge in thinking about tribal political economy, which we don't often hear about,
Right.
but that really became the basis of research for me, because what dawned on me, and it seems very simple, tribes are nations. And so they should be thinking and planning and acting the way nations do. So how does Germany handle something? How does Japan address something? A national government of a tribe may be more localized and have different conditions, but it's really the same in terms of we are the structure of governance and kind of the living conditions for our people. How do we maximize
Right.
that? How do we make that work? And so there's where the intersection of interest between politics, economics, and law started to really come together, and to realize it's an amazing, fascinating field. There's a tremendous amount of need in terms of addressing gaps and filling things that haven't happened before, but huge opportunities, unique opportunities in tribal communities to create things that can change people's lives positively and create new opportunities, new jobs, just quality of life issues across the board. So that was where, going back, as you said, to law school, the light bulb started to come on, and just the excitement built, and said, there's a real mission here. There's something worth doing. And it's been a privilege to work with tribes and the communities ever since to try to build on that. And I enjoy that every day.
Absolutely. I really want to share with the listeners that for your research on Native American political economy, that you received the first PhD ever awarded in the 100+ year history of the University of Washington's Jackson School of International Studies. And you said a very important word, many important words, it's that new opportunities. And so your commitment to that research in obtaining your PhD has really helped realize new things for tribes, new opportunities, new avenues of economy and economic development that may have never been realized. And, I know that Indian country is grateful for your work in that.
Well, I was very grateful at the Jackson School. The University of Washington is very engaged with tribes. They've got facilities and classes and a lot of outreach that happens. But in the School of International Studies, their focus on things like political economy had always been directed to places like Africa or Asia, and thinking about the nations in that regard. And when I came there, I was saying to people, Native American tribes have a treaty-based government-to-government relationship with the United States. That's an international relationship. These are nations within this geography, but who have their own independent sovereignty and are governing communities under that basis. And it seemed like the light bulb went on at that school, and they really welcomed that, and they just sort of had this aha moment of, boy, that's right. I think most people traditionally think of Native American affairs as a domestic issue within the United States, but it is in fact an international relationship between nations and national governments. So when they heard me talk about that in that context, I was delighted that they said, we get it. Let's now take what we work on here in this school that's designed for international development and those kind of relationships, and let's bring all those resources for the tribes to be able to use. And that was a tremendously gratifying partnership that happened, and a willingness on their part to see the reality of that relationship, but one that hadn't really been brought up before. So that's why it took 100 years, because they were focused on other parts of the world, but it was something that they really embraced. And my research all the way through the PhD program was tremendously supported, and they really brought a lot of interest and dedication and resources to filling that out. And we were able to bring in leaders from tribal communities all over the country to the university to give talks, to express what they had worked on and what they understood and how they were working within their spheres to develop the nations and then the international relationship with the United States. So it was a great place to work on issues from that vantage point of tribes are nations, they have national interests in international relationships, so let's build the things that they need built by using the knowledge and experience that's been gained from national development all over the world.
Right. And this is a topic, that international intertribal trade and investment and presence in that is really something that's really come on the scene in the awareness of the opportunities there within the past 10 years in such a strong way. And I'm really excited to see what the future will bring in those international, intertribal trade relationships and negotiations and really engagement between governments.
A great example of that that's happening now and connecting into the energy code is the Tribal Energy Consortium we've talked about. That is an organization whose members are tribes.
Right.
It was started by tribes that have long experience with energy development. So, for example, here in Oklahoma, the Osage Nation with their oil and gas was one of the founding members. The Southern Ute in Colorado, the Jicarilla Apache in the Southwest, MHA up in the Dakotas. These are tribes that are very skilled, very experienced over many decades with energy. But they realize the potential of working with other tribes that have similar resources, but have perhaps never been engaged in it, haven't taken it over themselves, or just getting to the point where new resources have been discovered. Tribes helping tribes is not only a great thing to do in general, but the opportunities for creating new resources, for creating economic results, creating jobs and sustainable conditions were just outstanding. So this is an organization that does exactly what you just described. The tribes that have knowledge, have resources in the subject area are working with the tribes that are coming new on the scene and can benefit from that to develop things in their territory. And instead of it being something that's driven by the federal government, which has been the traditional model, now the tribes are going to be able to share with each other, hey, this is the way to do it better. This is how this really works well. So forget about that old approach. This is what you want to do. And that sharing of knowledge, when we come together, we've had several meetings, for example, here in Oklahoma, where 24 tribes all coming together and sharing that knowledge and information, and then talking about, hey, let's meet again. Let's get together and really work on some projects and see how we can support each other. It's not only a benefit for the individual tribes and sort of intertribal relationships, but it benefits the entire country because tribes operate within communities. And in fact, many of the tribes' enterprises have more non-tribal members than tribal members who are working there, right? Because the communities are small. And these are typically rooted in rural areas that are often overlooked by the bigger businesses. So the tribe may be the primary economic generator for a community or an entire county. We see that often here in Oklahoma. So that intertribal sharing of expertise of resources and then working together in trade and education across these different areas, it's really starting to show some significant results. And I think we're starting to build some momentum on that, where we're reaching that tipping point where tribes are realizing, hey, let's think about that first. Let's find tribal partners that we can work with to develop what we want to do, who've done it before, who've done it successfully, and then we can work together on that. I think that has really come to a higher level in recent years, and we're starting to see some notable successes.
Absolutely. We talked about the partnerships and those relationships really between tribes, but also for businesses, native-owned, tribally owned businesses, community businesses, or businesses who seek to operate in Indian country. Tribes are developing boundaries of, all right, but if this project is going to exist, here is what is important in our communities for community investment, for initiatives like MMIW training, for law enforcement, for standards that should be set for doing business in Indian country. Talk about workforce development with the tribal colleges, trade schools, also with unions. And really, those ripple effects mean so much throughout Indian country, because there are some areas that there really aren't many, avenues of economic development. And now we're seeing that totally change. And people are, starting their own businesses, and tribes are entering new areas of operation and construction and other realities that are needs because of projects like that really address energy and natural resources and other areas. So it's really exciting.
The other thing that I've noted with tremendous gratitude, and I think is a breakthrough, is how, and we mentioned the University of Washington, but nationally, colleges and universities are realizing the value of working with tribes and tribal communities, whether it be on educational opportunities or specific projects. Here in Oklahoma, the major universities, OU, OSU, University of Tulsa, are actively engaged with tribes in Oklahoma. There's 39 tribes here working on specific projects. And so recently, OU won an award for teaming with the Osage Nation, where they're taking old oil wells that were abandoned, converting those to geothermal energy systems using the heat of the earth, which is a clean, limitless source of energy, connecting that into the Osage Nation's greenhouse complex, where they grow fresh fruits and vegetables all year round to eliminate what had been a food desert up in the northern Oklahoma area. But that's a very energy intensive facility, right? You got to cool it off in our 100-degree summers, and you got to warm it up in our sub-freezing winters. This repurposing of energy that is clean and limitless will eliminate those energy costs, help them produce the healthy food that the community needs. And that's something that the university has the technical expertise to do. They've got the engineering, they've got the science, and they realize we're a public institution with a public serving mission. We need to be out on the ground with these tribal communities and help. And so we're really seeing, I think, a renaissance of partnering there, where the cutting edge information that for so long tribes really seem to be left out of is now available. And so I would encourage for all of the listeners of timber people who work within tribes, when you're thinking about a complex project or one where you could use a lot of technical support or new area support, reach out to the university in your area, because I've never heard them say no. I ask all the time. I'm coming up to them with all kinds of projects and ideas and saying, hey, would you be interested in helping a tribe with this? They always say yes. And I think maybe they just haven't been asked enough, but it's amazing what is being done at those research institutions and how applicable it is really immediately for tribal communities to make gains. So that's another thing that I think is really driving progress and a resource that tribes have access to just for the asking.
Absolutely. I'm also seeing with universities and educational institutions this, a real investment in creating, pipelines for education, for investing in student success in different areas of discipline, particularly in like the STEM programs as well. And so this is important. We look at young people throughout Indian country and others who really are interested in new career paths. It's really exciting.
And that's the future in terms of progress.
Right.
Education is the basis of everything positive that's going to be happening, and it's our path for addressing these massive challenges that we see, whether it's climate-based or economic-based, all of the things that we're grappling with and that we read about in the headlines. It's educating the young people to come who are going to then apply that knowledge to solutions.
Right.
And so I think having the outreach by the educational institutions into the tribal communities, having tribal members get state-of-the-art information and conduct cutting-edge research, and then bringing that home and applying it in their communities, not only has the results, when we see this over and over again, whenever that happens, good things are happening, but the personal satisfaction and the sense of community that comes from that, to be able to know as an individual, hey, I went out and learned something, I brought it back to help the people who raised me and who I'm going to be connected with forever. Just a tremendous natural human gift in doing that. And so whenever we see that, I think we're really seeing the answer for not only today's issues that we grapple with, but for all of the challenges that are going to come.
Right. I really appreciate how much work you've put into your writing, from what you've learned in research, your observations, lessons learned, and sharing, with others through your writing, through books and publications. And if the listener would like to learn more about your publications or your books, where would they go to learn?
They can go to a website, which is pretty standard. It's the Guedel Strategic Law website. It's just Guedel Law, GUEDELLAW.com. And what I try to show there are projects that have come to life and how tribes are connecting through legal and educational resources to build the things that they want to build. And through there's contact portals, and so I'm always happy to share at no cost copies of the articles and things that I've had the chance to help produce that are useful, and I hope that they are for people. And so I try to spread that as broadly as possible, because the information there, I think, if it's taken in and applied to a tribe's individual situation, can really help things move forward on a project, maybe answer some questions. And if it's free, why not take it and build off from there? So checking the website, guedellaw.com, will give a portal for information that people would like to have.
That's great. Thank you. I want to thank you for your commitment to sovereignty and for economic development in Indian country. I also want to thank you for your service. I know that you have been a longtime supporter of veterans' rights and programs, and also serving in our U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and a judge advocate for the General Corps, and want to thank you for that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And it's obviously a privilege and honor for me to be able to serve our people. One other resource that I'd just really quick like to mention, it's just the website, and that's for the Tribal Energy Consortium. For people who are interested, again, in getting free information, whether it's the Model Tribal Energy Code or seeing the tribes that are involved in connecting, the website address is ndnenergy.org. So it's NDN, like an abbreviation for Indian, NDN Energy, all one word, .org. And on that site, you get more free information, links to articles, and the ability, if a tribe or tribal agency is interested, to join for free. There's no cost, no obligation, but it's an amazing place where tribes are sharing with tribes, helping educate and build projects together, and really, I think, realizing the vision of intertribal cooperation and growth. So highly recommend people check that out, and there's a lot of great things happening there.
Thank you so much. I know you will continue to do amazing things throughout your career and throughout Indian country, and would love to have you back on the show anytime. Thank you, Dr. Guedel, for being on Timber People.
Thank you, Gena.
Yakoki, thank you for joining us. Timber People is brought to you by the Possibilities Podcast platform.